Hi, I'm Sarah Schatz, and you're listening to Kindle Curiosity, a podcast for curious souls where we explore the creative process. This podcast is powered by the Kindle community on Patreon to keep things advert-free. Take a seat by the fire, and let's welcome today's guest. So this episode is actually the first that I ever recorded. My apologies for a little bit of rustling noise that was on the other end that I didn't really notice when I was recording, but I noticed when I played it back. So that's not your microphone connection. But I hope you really enjoy this episode, and a tiny update on the guest. She mentions later on in the episode that bravery doesn't have to be quitting your job and moving to the woods, but she has actually done that since then, and you can hop over to her Instagram to read the whole story about that. So I hope you really enjoy this episode, and let's get to it. My guest this week is Kate Laing. Kate is a forager, an artist, and a forever camp counselor. She has a lion's heart and a passion for cultivating bravery. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm so happy to be here, and I only wish that we could for real sit down and have coffee with each other.
Maybe one day.
That would be lovely.
So we're going to jump right into it, and I like to start with asking everyone about what fascinated you when you were a child.
Well, as a child, I definitely loved being outside, which definitely carried into adulthood, as I like to call myself a forager. I like to be outside whenever I could, and I would play and explore in our backyard. It was usually overgrown, but that's how I liked it. We had like patches of wild strawberries and rhubarb, and I liked to snip up some of those, and then I made nature soup with my sisters sometimes, and we'd find like pebbles and pine cone pieces and really whatever else we could find, and then make some nature soup.
I love that. And you also went to camp?
I did, yes. I did. That was a huge part of my childhood, and even into adulthood. I went to camp each summer for just a week, but it was absolutely magical. I think there is definitely magic in the forest of Camp Fontenelle. We would go on night hikes, and there would be, when you go on a night hike, it's completely dark, and you don't use a flashlight, you use your night vision. That's what we called it. And often the forest would simply be lit up by like fireflies, and there would be hundreds of them, and it was definitely magical.
Wow.
Yes.
We didn't have a lot of fireflies where I grew up, but we have them where I live now, and it is like seeing fairies.
Oh, it truly is.
Especially like with having not seen them, they seem like a fictional thing. My husband makes fun of me for how excited I get about the fireflies and how excited I get. There's like wild bunnies here.
Yes.
And I hadn't seen them until I lived here. What area did you grow up?
Eastern Nebraska, and that's where the camp was as well.
That sounds like a pretty great childhood. A lot of time outside, a lot of adventures at camp. So how did that lead into what you do now?
Yeah, my parents were very supportive of my creativity as well as my sisters growing up, and so that was very encouraging as I decided what I wanted to do in college. And so I decided to pursue an art major, and so I went to Minneapolis College of Art and Design for a year and a half, and then I transferred over to Hastings College here in Nebraska, and that's where I finished up my art degree. When I was finishing up my senior thesis for my art degree, it was solely focused on foraging and manipulating what I was able to find into sculpture.
I watched the video of that on your website.
Oh, yeah.
I love it. I really wish I could have seen it in person. Everyone, I'll link to it below so that you can, or I'll link to it in the show notes so you can make sure to go watch the video. It looks so immersive. So my degree was in theater, and of course I see it and I think it would be such an amazing set design because I want to like I want to see people in it.
Yeah.
And I want to like walk through it and see all of the details. And I don't know if this is a secret, but I could see certain things that it zoomed in on, but I couldn't tell what the long strands were made of.
Okay.
Is that secret, or can you tell us that?
No, I can totally tell you. So those were, I called them floral strands. And so each one was, I think they varied between 2 feet and 8 feet lengths of tied together flowers. And so it was, I took like little blooms and then I just tied them all together. So it
Wow.
was quite
That
tedious.
must have taken you a long time.
It did, and I'm sure there was an easier way to do it, but I tend to find the most challenging way to do things.
I can relate to that. I can relate to
Yep.
that for sure.
Yep.
Well, the effect was amazing. I really wish
Thank
I could
you.
have seen it, but I'm glad you got a video as well as photos of
Oh,
it, because
yes.
it gave you a sense of what it was like to be there. And the way the light hit it.
Yeah. Oh, the shadows were, that was one of the best parts. And you mentioned that you wish that you could see people like walking around it and inside of it. And that was the cool thing about the sculpture, because it was like kind of, I didn't want people touching it because it was so fragile, but I encouraged people to like lay underneath it. And the way that it was set up was that there were kind of like passageways almost. And so you could walk almost in between it or get up really close to it. And when you breathed, it would just like really faintly move. And it was, oh, it made me so happy to see people exploring in it, because it was funny because when people would first go up to it, they would stand like 3 feet away and be really scared because, you're not supposed to touch art in a gallery. But then I would just be like, go explore. Like, please take a look.
Yeah, I could really tell that from looking even just on your website. It was very like Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yeah.
Like I could see like the fairies. We did that one in university, and so that's kind of what it brought up for me. But I definitely, the next time you do one, I want to come see it.
Excellent. I'll send you a show invite.
Only so much can translate to your website, but
Yes.
just enough to make you really intrigued to be that close where you can see all the little details.
Definitely.
So let's go from that into what you do now and your creative process and how you like to work. And I know you have a lot of different mediums. You don't just do the botanical sculpting, but that is so unique. So I definitely want to hear about that, but about the other things you do too.
Sure. So I call myself a writer, maker, and explorer in pursuit of cultivating bravery. And I like that mission just because it opens up a lot of creative windows. I'm not like boxing myself into one medium. And there's nothing wrong with sticking with one medium, but I just like the freedom to explore different creative roads, I suppose. And so right now I am kind of focusing in more on weaving. I just really like how meditative the process is, and I like how the yarn and the textile feels on my hands while I work, and I'm experimenting more with texture lately, which is exciting because I like texture and detail in my work.
I've seen some of the weavings that you've posted to Instagram and to your website, and they're, would you call those like wall hangings? I don't know that much about weaving.
Yeah, they would go up on the wall.
I like how, like, I don't know the terminology for weaving because it's something I did like long ago in Girl Scouts, not seriously at all, but how the top piece is like a rustic branch or something. I like how you do that. And then the mixture of the different types of textures.
Yeah, and the branches that I use for my weavings are ones that I find outside. So if I'm like driving to work and I see this nice branch on the side of the road in somebody's yard or something, I'll like quickly pull over and get out and grab the stick.
I love that.
So I'm like, I need to source my work. And the way I do that is by stealing from people's yards. Not like stealing from people's yards, but I mean, they would just probably throw it in a lawn bag anyway, so.
That's true. I'm sure they don't mind. You're helping them with their yard work.
Exactly. And I don't like creep up towards their house, it's just like by the road, so it's pretty sneaky.
Yeah. So let's talk more about the foraging aspect. So that's one thing. You might see it, but do you ever go on like a foraging mission?
Yeah, I did a lot of that for my senior thesis, and I would go on purposeful foraging expeditions, and I would carry around this bag with me and my trusty pair of red scissors, and I would creep around campus and snip up plants and tree branches, and I would carry 10-foot long branches back to the studio with me, and people would look at me and be like, why is this girl carrying branches around with her? Like, why does she have armfuls of flowers all the time? And sometimes people are like, Kate, you love the earth, but you're taking away from it. You're killing plants when you trim pieces of plants off. And I'm like, yes, that's true, but I always try to maintain respect for the earth. And when I trim off a branch, I'm like, thank you, branch, for being beautiful. And my other reasoning for it, and this was a big purpose for my senior thesis work, I was taking away from plants, but my justification was that the seasons come and go, nature dies anyways, and in the way that I'm working with the plants and maintaining respect for my materials, I'm assisting in preserving the beauty and helping it last longer. And even though it's very fragile, it's remaining, I guess.
Yeah, there's definitely, like you said, a respect for the way that you forage and you take things. You aren't chopping down a whole tree. You aren't killing the plant itself. You aren't killing the insect. You're kind of taking a piece that would have died in winter anyway and turning it into something beautiful.
Yes, and I don't hack away at bushes. I trim them nicely, and I don't disfigure the shape of it. And I love what you said.
Right. Like a gardener would.
Yes, exactly. Apparently was Snapchatted a few times, and people were like, why is this girl carrying 10-foot long branches with her?
I love it.
I do too. And I 10 years ago, I would have been totally embarrassed to do that. But now I'm just I need these branches, so it's okay.
Yeah, I can relate. I don't want to talk too much about myself in the podcast, but...
No, please do. Please do.
So I was a theater major, and in directing class, it wasn't a fairy with wings, but it was kind of a fairy-like setting. And so I went to the local park, and we borrowed giant boulders in the dead of night so that we wouldn't, get a million questions what we were doing. We brought them back. And so they were part of the set. Yeah, I can relate to carrying strange things around campus.
Oh, yes. I love that story because it reminds me of the sneaky aspect about creeping around at night to get things too. Because we had the campus science garden, and I was 97% sure that I wasn't supposed to forage pieces from the science garden because I just felt like it was off limits. So I would go at midnight, and people would drive past, and I would duck to the ground because I'm nobody would really care probably. But
right. I feel for me, it was an introvert thing. Some of my extroverted friends would have probably just went and got it and talked to everybody about what they were doing. And I was just I don't want the attention. I just want the giant rocks.
Yeah, totally. And that was the sneaky aspect was kind of fun too. It felt kind of rebellious. And yeah. I'm also an introvert, so I definitely relate to that.
Going back to your thesis project, I know there were flowers and sticks, but there were also insects. So do you want to talk a little bit about foraging for creatures?
I never collected the bugs when they were still alive. I just apparently had a knack for finding really cool dead bugs. I would just be walking down the sidewalk, and there would be a dead bee laying on the ground. And so I would just pick them up and rescue the dead bee. We had a lot of cicadas around the school, or especially around the campus or the art building. So I would just pick those up, and people thought that was weird. But then it was cool because I would start to have people recognizing what I was doing, and they would find dead bugs or a really cool branch or a flower or something, and they would leave it in my studio for me to find. And yeah, and so I'm people are also picking up dead bugs because I am, and it's becoming more normal even though it's not.
That's nice.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, it was becoming a thing. Mm-hmm. And I like how it's so directly related to the nature soup that you made when you were a kid. So many times we have something that we love when we're kids, and then it gets lost along the way. And so I love that you took something you did for fun, and then you found a way to make it fine art.
That's actually a big reason why I decided to do this for my senior thesis, because I was beginning to recognize in the routine of college how just like sucked into the routine that we get, and we start losing the magic of childhood, and like we're just tired. And I was like, well, this process brings me so much joy, and it makes me not feel like such an adult.
I love that. So before we move on, do you want to talk a little bit about your work with illustrations?
Sure. Before I started really focusing in on sculpture, I started developing illustration work, and I still dabble in that from time to time. The way that I started out my business was in lettering and illustration. So I've had my business Kate Works for about 3.5 years now, and I started it my junior year of college. That's when I made the peach notes, which are little tiny cards, like business card sized encouragement pieces. And so each design has like a little encouraging phrase like nestle yourself somewhere safe and warm, or make yourself a cup of tea, or something like that. And my intention for those is for a person to hang on to them, or like leave them behind in a coffee shop for strangers to pick up, or leave them in a library book for someone to find in a week or 10 years or whenever they happen to find it.
Yeah, I love that. So I ordered a set of these last week, and I'll be sure to link to them in the show notes as well. And I love the idea that you can kind of keep one as a mantra, or you can leave it. A year or two ago, I started a project which I've since passed on, but I'll link to it as well, called Random Love Letter. And so we were leaving sticky notes with positive messages around, and these are perfect random love letters that you just leave for people. I just love the idea of leaving something positive for somebody who might be having a bad day or needs a little pick-me-up.
Absolutely.
So I think that was one of the first things I saw of yours before I kind of met you through ArtStew 52. I somehow saw those notes somewhere. I don't really remember, but they kind of stuck out to me. And then you were doing the ArtStew takeover, which, let me just back up for a minute and explain what the ArtStew is. So ArtStew 52 is a community for artists, and it has weekly prompts, and the creator of that is going to be on the podcast in the future. And you were doing a takeover on the Instagram where you were showing some of your process for making like some botanical art. And that's when I got excited and heard you talking about foraging and was like, this is so unique and perfect, and I have to have this on the podcast.
Yeah, I was excited that you asked me and that you watched the takeover. It was fun.
So let's talk for a little bit about your Bravery Missions.
I started that, I think, about 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago. It's an environment where people can submit anonymously their stories of bravery, and I end up publishing them on my website, and it ends up being like a collective of anonymous stories that just represent bravery in small and different ways, or small and big ways, just because I'm a firm believer that bravery isn't necessarily like the big, like buy the plane ticket or quit your job and move to the woods sort of. Bravery can very easily be getting out of bed in the morning, and that might be the hardest thing that you do that day, or like making the phone call to make an appointment, or like call a parent you haven't talked to in like a year or 10 years even. Bravery is just found in all of the different spaces. It's not just the big and the golden. It's the small and the shadows sometimes.
I love that. It's like a celebration of bravery in all of its different forms, I guess.
Yeah. And the neat thing is that because it's strangers, you don't associate like a face with it. And so then I feel that you're more able to read the story and then put yourself into it, just because it's like this story that's just like beautifully floating there, and you can immerse yourself in it and find bits of yourself in the stories too.
And so what was your inspiration to start?
It actually, the name Bravery Mission came from Bravery Missions that my mom would give me when I was growing up, because I was a very shy, introverted person when I was younger. I still can be. But yeah, my mom would challenge me to go into the grocery store and buy milk, because I was like, I can't go and do that like by myself. And she'd be like, it's a bravery mission, Kate, you can do it. And so I was like, dang it, it's a bravery mission. I can do this, right? I'm brave. And so that's why I called it that, because my mom encouraged me to do that. So I was like, I can encourage other people to do bravery missions because I was encouraged to do them when I was young. So
So what else kindles your curiosity?
So we talked about nature and foraging and summer camp. Those are all huge inspirations for me. I'd say that travel also helps. I haven't done too much of it yet, but I've started to kind of get the travel bug, and so I want to start buying plane tickets and save my money for that. I went to Zion National Park in Bryce Canyon and Hoover Dam in Vegas with my dad and my stepmom a few months ago, and I was insanely inspired by the red rocks and how small I felt. I made a weaving collection inspired by that.
I'm sure as a forager too, going somewhere where different things grow.
Oh yeah. Yep. Because the landscape is very different than Nebraska.
Because you're so inspired by nature. Travel is really great for you.
Definitely.
A month or two, well, I guess it's been a little bit longer now, but we went to Oklahoma where my husband grew up for a friend's birthday party. And while all the other adults were doing normal adult birthday party activities, I was running around with kids picking up acorns because there were giant acorns. They were called bur oak. The acorn cap comes down really far over the acorn like a giant fuzzy hat.
Okay.
And I had just never seen an acorn this big before. It was like, I think I picked up one that was almost 2 inches around.
Wow.
Giant. I will post a picture of this acorn.
Please.
Because I was fascinated. And then so I got all the little children. Here I am, an adult, and we were all running around picking up acorns. We were having the best time while everyone else was eating pizza. So yeah, I can imagine just something as simple as an acorn when you travel somewhere different can look completely different.
Oh, totally. I love that. I want to see a picture because I don't think I've seen a picture of a 2-inch acorn before.
Yeah. I think the first one I found might have been a little bit of like a, what do you call it? Like an anomaly? I think there's another more scientific word for it. Like a mutant, a little mutant acorn, because it was the biggest one and it was missing the acorn inside. It was just the cap.
Oh, okay.
And so at the time I was really interested in making felted acorns, natural caps, and putting little felted acorn balls inside.
Oh, I love it.
And so I was like, this will be a giant felted acorn. And then none of the rest of them I found were that big, but they were all very interesting looking and very different than the acorns either where I grew up in Mississippi or that grow here. They're all kind of more smooth, like textured, but not fuzzy caps. So I'll definitely send you a picture, and I'll be sure to put a picture in the show notes because I was fascinated.
Please do.
So what is the strangest thing you've ever found foraging?
Oh, the strangest thing. That's a fun question. I told you that I was summer camp was a huge part of my life, and it still is because I was then a camp counselor for 4 summers. And we had this massive forest that we took the campers hiking, but then when campers weren't there on the weekends, the staff would go out and explore a little bit and just go for hikes. And we went on the adventure trail once. It was just a small group of us, and we heard running water, and we were we didn't know there was running water over there. So we trudged down the nettle-filled hill, and we found, I guess this isn't really natural, but we found a bunch of really old glass bottles and containers, and they were all rusty and dirty and gross. Not gross, they were just
really aged, yeah.
Rusty and dirty. And we were like, where the heck did these come from? And, that was just a really cool discovery. And then I found a fox. I think it was a fox skull. I don't know what kind of animal it was, but I found animal bones too. So that was a really good mission.
Yeah, kind of off the beaten path.
And then there was not a cave because it was a man-made cave, and that was where the creek was running out from. And we went in there a little tiny bit, and there was a dead beaver, which that sounds really gross, and it was pretty gross actually.
But not something that you see all the time.
No.
Do you know the artist Walter Anderson?
I feel like I've heard of his name before.
He lived down on the coast of Mississippi, and he was a really interesting man. He once tied himself to a tree during a hurricane so he could experience the hurricane. So he was a little bit eccentric.
Definitely.
But he made the most beautiful paintings of nature. And he would go down to Horn Island off the coast of Mississippi, and sometimes he would paint dead animals. He could see the beauty in that. So I'll link to him. I'll send you a link to some of his work.
Please.
One of the things that I love about Walter Anderson is he uses really vibrant colors that aren't necessarily how things look in real life, but can capture the spirit of a thing. So anyway, he's one of my favorite artists.
Yeah.
If you ever have a chance to go to Ocean Springs and visit his museum. So yeah. Your nature missions kind of reminded me of the spirit of Walter Anderson. So
very cool.
So usually creators are asked how to become a professional at what they do. But my question is, if someone wanted to just dabble in, and you do more than one thing. So if someone wanted to dabble in foraging, where would they start?
Honestly, I would just say to go outside and get in the dirt. Even if you just go for a walk around your neighborhood and just keep your eyes open for things that you might not normally find. Naturally, I mean. So like look at the ground intentionally and bring a little basket with you or a backpack or something so you can put your findings in it. You can like go to parks or out into the country, or if you have like a forest nearby, or if you live in the mountains or something, go for a hike. You can do some research about your area too, just to make sure you don't pick up anything itchy or poisonous or that kind of thing.
That's a good tip.
Yeah, but just, I guess, like get your feet in the dirt and your hands in the dirt and look around. Keep your eyes open. That's what I would say.
I love it. So that's some of your homework. If you want to dabble in foraging, you can go out and forage and post a picture of what you find with hashtag Kindle Curiosity so that we can see it. You can tag us in it. And then let's see, if someone wanted to dabble in weaving, do you have any beginner tips for that too?
I'm self-taught in weaving, and so I just bought a loom, and it's really like quite easy to do, just to experiment with. There's a lot of, just try it. I can send you a couple tutorials.
So basically just try it.
Yep.
So where can we connect with you online?
You can find me over on Instagram at Bravely Kate Laing. I love meeting new people over there, so feel free to shoot me a message, or like if you find anything while you're outside foraging or just exploring a little bit, feel free to shoot me a message of what you find, or tag me in your stories or a post or whatever. I also have a website, which is katelang-kateworks.com, and you'll be able to see more of my work down there, and that's where you'll also be able to find Bravery Mission, and you can even submit stuff to Bravery Mission there.
Awesome. And we'll link to all of that in the show notes, which you can find at kindlecuriosity.com/podcast. And so thanks again, Kate, for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And be sure to tag us in all of your foraging adventures. Please
do. It would be lovely to see.
Curiosity is funded entirely by supporters on Patreon. You can pledge as little as $1 a month to keep this podcast advert-free. Additional tiers unlock bonus rewards like extra podcast episodes, the Kindle Book Club, and our virtual maker gatherings. Learn more at kindlecuriosity.com or find me on Patreon as Sarah Schatz. If you'd like to support Kindle Curiosity without becoming a patron, you can subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Find all of the show notes from today at kindlecuriosity.com. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I'd love to know what you think. You can find me on most social media as @SarahD.Schatz. Thanks for listening, and thanks especially to all of my patrons on Patreon. P.S. I'd love to know what's sparking your curiosity. Share your moments of creativity, exploration, and wonderment with hashtag Kindle Curiosity.